definition of reality, having said so much about the different kind of afflictive emotions, attachment, anger, etc. Well, having said not that much about it, but we've heard so much about it again and again. So, hearing that our problems come from our mind, in particular, certain afflictive emotions. Now, this in particular, it examines errors. It examines, are we really inherently, what about this, our mind being afflicted? Is our mind really intrinsically afflicted? I think it's an important idea because of also our self-image. If we feel low about ourselves because of feeling we have a lot of anger, etc. But also if we, even if we don't feel that way, to understand that these can be removed, these different afflictions, they are dependent on many causes and conditions, they don't exist inherently. Okay? So this takes us a little bit towards understanding the mind better. Okay. So what does it say in the first verse? It says, it is said that attachment, aversion, and confusion. So here confusion has the connotation, well, Boaz, what is the word confusion in the Sanskrit? Is it kind of ignorance or... Okay. Does confusion work in Sanskrit? Is that confusion? Stupor, confusion, I don't know. Does it work? Because it's not the word ignorance.
Ignorance is usually avidya, which literally means not knowing.
Not knowing, that would be...
Know-how would be more
confusion, okay. So not understanding reality. So we have attachment, aversion, and confusion, or not understanding reality. Always arise from conceptualization, from wrongly understanding reality. They always come from not understanding how things really exist. They arise invariably in dependence on the pleasant. So attachment arises as a result of the pleasant phenomena. Aversion arises as a result of aversion, and confusion as a result of being wrong, being in error about things. Okay. Alright, so that already shows that they can't exist in and of themselves because they depend on pleasant. Attachment depends on the pleasant, anger depends on the unpleasant, and confusion on wrong perceptions, on error. So they can't exist in and of themselves. That which arises, and it says in verse 2, that which arises in dependence on the pleasant, the unpleasant, or error, does not exist inherently. Thus, the afflictions are not real. Real as in like they don't exist in and of themselves. Truly, they don't exist truly. So it feels so real when they arise, like certain states of mind, it feels so real. Right? But it doesn't exist that way. So the second here, the first verse, proves that phenomena don't exist inherently. Okay? So, then now it goes on to say, this is now a little bit harder. The rest down there, from below, I mean, after we get over the first few verses, it's easier. But what it's saying here is, when we have afflictions, there must be some basis. Some base, right? What are they based on? Are they based on the self? Right? And if there's no self, are they based on the mind? Right? Is there some underlying solid base? So it's this, again, this idea, okay, these afflictions are such troublemaker. What causes us trouble are anger, etc. And so some of the philosophers who don't agree with what the Buddhist view on the Prasangika, they would say, but you must have something, if they cause that much trouble, and if they don't exist intrinsically, they're just labeled on the basis of many different moments of awareness, and they're dependent on causes and conditions. If they don't exist that solidly, there must be something solid, like a solid basis. So is that the person, or is that the mind? Okay? So the person, well, the self's existence or non-existence has not been established in any way, it says in verse 3. So there is no strong basis like the person, for instance. Neither the self exists inherently, nor selflessness exists inherently. So how can you have a solid basis found in the person or even in selflessness? So there's nothing solid. Has not been established in any way. Without that, how could the afflictions existence or non-existence be established? How can we say they inherently exist or they're inherently non-existent? So the sense of like a solid existence, solid non-existence, how could that be the case? And then 4, it says, the one to whom the afflictions belong has not been established either. So not only is there no base, but there's no one that the afflictions belong to. My afflictions. Previously just the base in general, as in like the self's existence or non-existence. So as a basis, but there's nothing that to whom the afflictions belong. There's no owner of the afflictions, because that self cannot be found. We have a strong sense, this is my affliction, I owe them, okay? But actually, which is why we get upset. Oh, I'm so angry, I'm such a bad person because I'm the owner of the anger. But that person doesn't exist. So to one to whom the afflictions belong has not been established either. Without anyone to whom to belong, there can be no afflictions of anyone. So we identify very strongly with them, but it may give us a sense, well, I mean, in the sense of, if you take positive qualities, like you go through your curriculum vitae, as as he suggested, so they don't belong, all these qualifications don't belong to anyone. But even with the afflictions, there's actually no self to who they belong. So they don't exist solidly. All right. Boss, if you have anything if you've come across anything, please say so. Okay, great. Then number 5, it takes...
4,
no? 4, right, yeah. So 4 I read, so saying that the self, but now the question that arises, how about the mind? Maybe there is some kind of basis of the mind that solidly exists. Who could be saying that? The mind-only school. Right? The followers of the mind only. So you see, in the lower schools, like the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, the emphasis is more on there is no self. So these lower schools are very interesting, because what they emphasize is that phenomena exist out there. It's all out there, but there's just no self that really perceives them. So the sense that phenomena are out there objectively, we have that same sense, don't we? I totally agree. I'm a Vaibhashika at heart. Well, in a way, I feel like I'm not even a Vaibhashika. I feel most comfortable with the non-Buddhist schools. A lot of them. I feel like that. There's a solid self, right? So if I feel comfortable with anyone from my own behavior, it's them. Vaibhashika, when they say things exist out there, yeah, that seems right to me. So it exists all out there. But they do deny the self. They say there's no inherent I. Then in the Chittamatra school, if you go through that, they take another extreme. There's nothing out there, there's only mind. It takes you from the extreme of this objective reality out there to the extreme, there's only mind. It's kind of like when you're on a balancing beam. If you go too far this way, if you just go like this, it doesn't help. You have to really go that way to be able to get into the... So it's kind of interesting how if you take those philosophical schools and you actually start off with Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, yes, it introduces no self, but it still gives you the impression, oh, things are out there. Thank you very much. That's how I feel. So don't take away too much from me, right from the beginning. So you negate this much and still, okay. So the mind is already a little bit more flexible. But I'm not emphasizing mind and consciousness enough. It's not emphasized enough in that tradition. So now you go to Chittamatra. Only mind. Wow, there's nothing out there. That's not the final view, but it's an interesting idea. That mind plays such a huge part. It really gets us used to the idea that, wow, it's like our mind is so important. Now this is the basis here, on the basis of which...
just verse 3.
Yeah.
What is it there for? We have verse 1 and 2 in order to show the dependence or lack of inherent existence to the dependence. Then 4 is to show the
basis. You want to know, you see there's this view of like, if the afflictions are there, you need some base. You need some kind of solid...
This is the person that...
As an example... Yes. So here, the example is the base. So the argument that self is not the basis. The argument here is that the self, verse 3 and 4, that the self is not the basis, because in general we don't say there's self or selflessness, and in terms of the role that the self plays, is that as the owner of the afflictions. That cannot be found. Okay.
Is the same argument for both verses?
Well, there's a slight difference. The third verse is just saying self as a basis, but less of an owner. It's less mentioned as an owner. It's just saying, well, there's no self, even the selflessness, neither self nor selflessness. And then 4, it says more specifically, if there were a self, it would serve as the owner, and that is also cannot be found. This is my understanding of it. My very limited understanding. And then verse number 5, now having said about the self, and of course we go, whoa, how can you understand it? If you meditate on that, right? I mean, there's a lot of verses, the 27 chapters, many chapters have 12, 15, 25 verses. If you meditate on each and really spend time, of course you get a very different, we're kind of flipping through them just to give you like a course kind of sense. But of course, and now if you've noticed, I'm no longer, we do meditation in the afternoon. I apologize, but it's either, I hope you get it. So in the afternoon we go back to meditating. But this is actually just a meditational menu. So the verses 4 and 5, you will spend some time on that, of course. And then 5 is like taking the view, well, maybe there's just mind. Right? We could see how we can fall into that kind of notion that, oh, there's just mind. So mind is really there. The more you think about, the more you become mindful of mind, the more you also have the tendency to think, oh, that's all there is, there's just mind. Okay, so, but here it engages in this analysis, and like a 5-fold analysis that actually was done in verse, well, we haven't done it yet, but it's in verse, in chapter, the beginning of chapter, 22. If you look at the beginning of chapter 22, examination of the Tathagata, there's a five-fold analysis. Have you ever heard of the 7-fold reasoning by Chandrakirti? Mm-hmm. The 7-fold reasoning by Chandrakirti, when you take the chariot, when you take a car, for instance, not a chariot, that's the old-fashioned version. What makes a car a car? Nagarjuna explains 5 reasonings. Okay, sometimes also just 2, either one or different. Sometimes you have like one or different. That's one way. But then you can also take it a 5-fold, taking it a little further. That's the one here in chapter 22. We have the 2-fold so far. If I exist inherently, either I'm one with my mind and body or separate from it. But I can take it a little bit further, as in like introducing another idea. So, can you find an I? Okay, that is one, but the aggregates are different. Those are the first 2 of the 5 reasonings, and then you add 2 more. So the Tathagata is here the Buddha. You analyze the Buddha. Even the Buddha doesn't exist inherently. But you can take yourself. Okay? If you take verse number 1 of chapter 22, that's on page 26, I am not the aggregates. I am not my mind and body. I am not different from mind and body. So there's no I to be found, as in like being one with my mind and body. There's no I to be found that is different from mind and body. Then here it says the aggregates are not in me. The aggregates are not in me. There's no I that can be found in which the aggregates exist. But I can also use this, so nor am I in the aggregate. So the aggregates are not in me, and I'm not in the aggregates. Or I could say, this is a different way of reflecting the same, the aggregates are not dependent on me, and I'm not, there's no I, the aggregates are dependent on, and there's no I that is dependent on the aggregates. It seems that way, right? It seems that way, even though we believe it's inherently existent, but we make it work. We somehow think that there's an inherent I that is still dependent. We don't have a problem with contradictions. We live contradictions, actually. So, here in this case, you could either argue with regard to the second line, the I is not in me, in my body and mind, nor are my mind and body in the I. That I cannot be found. Or if you formulate it slightly differently, neither is there an inherent I on which body and mind depend, nor if I don't do this, I will forget the time. Vada just gave me 5 minutes left, but seriously, I can get carried away. So the aggregates are not, either you say the aggregates are not in mind and body, or you say the aggregates are not dependent. No, sorry. The aggregates are not in an inherently existent I, nor are the aggregates dependent on an inherently existent I. That would be reasoning number 3, just put in different ways. And then reasoning number 4 would be the inherent existent I is not in the aggregates. If you really said something you could think about it, so it's like it's not in the aggregates. Can you find it? So when I just say that, you should really, when you meditate, you really meditate on that. Can I find the aggregates in the self, mind and body in the self, or can I find the self in the aggregates? Right? You would go through this analysis. Or can the aggregates depend on the I? Or do I depend on the aggregates? Can I find such an I that depends on them? That's 3 and 4. And then about possession. Is there an I that possesses? Can you point at an I and an inherent I that possesses mind and body? Cannot find that. We don't really feel that the aggregates possess the I. We feel the other way around, which is why it's only mentioned one way. We have a notion that mind and body depend on each other, and I depend on mind and body. But that, in terms of an inherently existent I, doesn't work, which is why you analyze it. But then in terms of the possessor, it's always ever the I that possesses mind and body.
So here are afflictions in mind?
So here, the same reasoning, you take a mind, that is like the basis, an afflicted mind.
Consciousness, vijnana?
Just, vinyaya, like as vijnaya, as in like consciousness, right? Just consciousness, like a basis, that is the basic consciousness, something that is truly there. And the afflictions. It's almost like, I don't know, a table. A table is like the mind, and then you put little things on it. Those are the afflictions. So some people like to see it like, you need some basis, right? It would be like saying, I can put this clock here, it exists, but I don't have a basis to put it on. In everyday life, we have a sense there must be some ground, there must be something solid underneath it for it to exist. To put this somewhere, to place this cup, to place this watch, I need a stable surface. I mean, it has to be something stable on which I can put it. For my mind to be there needs to be a body. This is like our sense of reality. But not only do we want a conventional body, a conventional table, we want some solid, real table, like concrete. So again, with regard to the afflictions, if they cause us so much harm, if they don't exist inherently, they must have some inherent basis. So inherent I can't be found. Now what about inherent consciousness? Just consciousness. So actually when I say the nature of our mind is pure, I'm pretty sure you're thinking of some inherent pure mind on which the afflictions just pop up, right? Very natural. This inherent nice. So great, use that on your analysis now. There's an inherent underlying nature of the mind. That's how we feel. When I say the mind, the nature of our mind, that's exactly what comes to mind. And then you do the fivefold analysis. Is it one with the afflictions, that inherent mind, different from the afflictions? Are the afflictions dependent on that inherent mind? Or does the inherent mind depend on the afflictions? Or does the inherent mind own the afflictions? Okay? That's described in 5. In 4, you just turn it around. Do the afflictions, now you put the afflictions first. Do the afflictions, are they identical with the inherent mind? Or are the afflictions different from the inherent mind? So actually 3 and 4 are the same. Actually 1 to 4 are all the same. But do the afflictions, are they the owner of the afflicted mind? Okay? So 1 to 4 are all the same, except you put the focus on the afflictions. So first you take the afflicted mind versus the afflictions. Is the afflicted mind one with the afflictions? Is it different from the afflictions? Right? All the way through. Is it the owner of the afflictions? In verse 6 you put it the other way around. Are the afflictions one with the afflicted mind. Are the afflictions are the afflictions the owner of the afflicted mind? Okay, you take both into consideration. So just think, what is their relationship? You basically, if there were such an inherent basis, an inherent mind, the nature of mind, the mind we have, this pure river, how does it relate to the afflictions if it really existed inherently?
It's both in verse 5, not verse 6, right?
No, 5 and 6, you both do it, but you just put it, you take the reverse.
But 6 is about pleasant, unpleasant.
Ah, sorry. No,
Five,
you're right.
First
Yes.
two lines and second.
You're right. Yes, the first line and second line of verse 5. Sorry, I got confused. So that's the hardest part of the verse, of the chapter. The rest is easy. So that's before lunch. Good digestion. Successful digestion. Okay, great. Anyway, see you after lunch at 2:30. 2:30. We decided to start a little earlier so we can wrap it up before it gets dark and you get home in time. Okay, so we'll finish this. I hope we finish this chapter, but we'll meet again at 2:30. Okay, thank you.